Hello and welcome to Webgains Transform 2020. Today we're exploring the mildly contentious but vital topic of diversity and inclusion. We live in a diverse world, but is it inclusive? It's a world of Me Too, of Black Lives Matter. There's a movement afoot, but are we transforming fast enough? Inclusion isn't all about statistics, making sure we tick the boxes when we pull together a board or a panel. It's about equal representation and giving people the opportunity to be the best version of themselves, irrespective of their background. And for most players in the performance market, equal opportunity is a given, but we need some stronger voices in keeping forward. And I really thank the panel today for joining us, because we've tried to pull together a panel and have a really kind of diverse and inclusive conversation about the future of the industry, and it has been challenging to get people to agree to be part of this conversation. So I'm really grateful to all of you for being here today and shining a light on this, on this really important topic.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you.
I've had the pleasure of working with Kalpna on numerous initiatives so far, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. She is a true inspiration and a trailblazer, building a career as the head of production at the BBC. Kalpna went on to be named the Asian Businesswoman of the Year, and she now sits on the board of many organisations and launched 91 Ways in 2015. And more recently BeOnBoard, of which more later, I'm sure. Welcome, Kalpna. And James is our head of product here at Webgains. He's worked in a number of companies, both in-house and outsourced at a global level, looking after a very high-performing team at Webgains. He's very focused on ensuring diversity of skills and diversity of kind of opportunity to attract and retain the best of breed in terms of talent to the business and within your team. So welcome, James.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Stacy. Stacy's our Webgains own account executive. She recently set up and is now chairing the ED&I board at Webgains. Stacy champions inclusivity as an agenda at Webgains, but also I think throughout your life, Stacy, it would be fair to say, you've got a strong ethos, and we've got a sort of very good sort of mantra at Webgains, which I know you've kind of bought into, around kind of the concept of never stop learning. And I know you've been exploring sort of different ways that we can sort of continuously improve as a business, and how we can empower the team to be the best version of themselves. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you, Stacy, about the board and about your kind of hopes and dreams for the business as we continue to grow and move forwards. So welcome, Stacy.
Thank you. Hi.
Kalpna, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Could you just start with a bit more on your background? I've not done you the best service. I've kind of given you a very brief intro there. Can you give us a bit more background to yourself, and maybe a bit more sort of detail on what is BeOnBoard? Why did you set it up? And what are your plans?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really, really pleased to be part of this panel, and also part of an industry which I always think is forward-facing and future-thinking. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So my name's Carlton Wolf. I have over 20 years' experience in the creative industries. I work for the BBC, rising to head of production. I set the brand for the Natural History Unit. I ran the whole of the organisation, the whole of Factual across not just Bristol, but the whole of the UK. And that was a empowering and exciting career. But there was a culture there that I'd like to, I'm sure we'll touch upon in a minute. But that culture and that experience and my own personal experience of growing up in an environment where equality was the lowest, seemed to be the lowest priority, where there was a lot of racism, in fact, had led me to pivot my career into another direction. So since I've left the BBC, I've made a personal choice to make a difference in terms of race equality and to enhance and alleviate race equality. So what have I been doing? I've been doing sort of three main things, all to disrupt, make the Southwest a better place, and I'm hoping that we can create really truly inclusive organizations through what I do. So the first thing I did was set up a charity called 91 Ways to Build a Global City. There are 91 languages spoken in Bristol, which until I discovered this, nobody in Bristol actually celebrated or talked about. And I thought this was a great opportunity to talk about what a great city we've got. And if we could capitalize on all these communities, we could have potentially a better global city. So 91 Ways is bringing all those 91 communities together, empowering them, helping them to be, to support them in their aims, and therefore creating a more unified Bristol. I followed this up with BeOnBoard. So BeOnBoard is a response to the fact that when I sat on boards, and I've sat on many boards, the boards all look the same, what I call a homogenous boardroom. And I found that to be rather disturbing in an environment where actually we have multicultural communities, where we have people from all backgrounds, but these boardrooms where decisions are made, key decisions are made, did not have representatives from those boardrooms. They were actually just the same, not worse than that. It was the same people. So what I call your, middle class, middle-aged white man who was basically a bit like the old boys' school network. Everybody sitting on each other. And I found that sort of rather, what I found was that actually what this is doing is not allowing for the growth and the potential for what these organizations could succeed in. So I set up BeOnBoard which supports businesses to become more diverse, particularly in their leadership and boardrooms. And diversity is very important because there's much research which shows that diversity leads to greater innovation. It leads to a more competitive edge. It attracts a wider range of talent, and it also manages to retain that talent. And it does actually increase productivity. So I thought, actually, what a missed opportunity for businesses that they're not thinking about diversity. So BeOnBoard is a response to that. I also sit on lots of boards, and I sit on boards mainly because I want to influence the decisions on those boards, and I also want to ensure that I'm in touch with boards and what they need, and organisations and what they need. So I sit on the university's board here, something called Feeding Bristol, which is about making sure that Bristol reduces its food poverty and food insecurity, and many other boards like that. Just to let you know, BeOnBoard, the way that it supports businesses to diverse is that it does two things. One, we are building a cohort of BME professionals, because I was always told by boards that, oh, well, we can't find anybody, we can't find people who have the skills. Well, I knew that there are many people from my similar background who actually have skills, professional skills, and would find it interesting to be on a board. So we've been building a cohort of BME professionals to be board ready, to be the next generation of leaders on these boards and these organisations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kalpna. That was a great backdrop to yourself. Still not doing yourself the full service, but we'll get there, I'm sure. I'm going to pick up on something that you mentioned sort of midway through that kind of introduction, which was around diversity and how improving diversity has been proven to increase potential for innovation, to kind of give you the edge to improve productivity. And there's some statistics to back that up. I mean, James, you run a high performance team here at Webgains. How do you ensure diversity in terms of your team to drive the best outcomes for the business, but also obviously to kind of look at the individuals within your team?
Yeah, it's a good question, and sort of quite alarming listening to Kalpna talking. It just how much of what I was thinking about she's already just said. So I'm going to put a pin in that, just in case anyone thinks I'm just repeating. I'm doing the repeating what somebody else already said trick, because in terms of product teams, it's essential to have people in the team who can not only think and deliver high performance results, but really help other people to think like that. One of the things that we have as a team, and the purpose of a team, is to stop the business doing things which aren't the best things for the business. So we're 100% focused on outcomes and value, not building the thing which somebody else has got, or building the thing which the boss has asked for. We actively have to say no to that kind of thing. And really, the only way that you can achieve really good outcomes is to be agnostic about not only what you're going to do, but necessarily how you're going to do it. It all has to be about the why. And by definition, and I fundamentally believe this, having worked, I was at BBC myself for nearly 10 years, and then working in publishing teams, and then doing a lot of contracting work with both publishing and then latterly digital and then product teams, is if you don't have a diversity of input in your teams, if you don't have a diversity of thinking, you will fail. And that failure comes. We've seen the societal failings of having a lack of having too much narrow thinking, but having narrow thinking in a product team and in a business overall, categorically you will fail, because you will repeat your sins, and you will fail to reap the benefits of new insight. One of the things that Kalpna said, and I literally just wrote it down because it's such a key point, is by lacking that diversity, you will not be able to recognize the potential growth. You won't know what you don't know, because you're not bringing those things in. And so what we do as a team when I'm recruiting, and something I've just been doing recently, is hardly anything to do with our recruiting is based on past experience or education. It's really not got a lot to do with it. We want people who have some experience, so it suggests they're not just dipping their toe in the water of working with this kind of team. But it's really about how they communicate in the interviews. We give everyone the same brief, and the brief has got nothing technical attached to it. It's all about how do you explain things? How are you as a communicator, especially with something which is ill-defined, and I particularly do that with my briefs. And so how are they communicating to me? How would they communicate to someone who doesn't understand? How do they bring them along on the journey? And as a consequence of that, just in my small team, we have 5 different nationalities, literal nationalities in that team. Now, is that because of that process? Well, it's definitely that can't be proven, but it's a consequence of that process, and we have very different voices. I don't have the final say in my team, and that shouldn't be how we work, because, as I said, it is all about the outcomes, and that's what drives high performance, and it certainly has done for us. The necessity of having diversity in the team is so that you're you're avoiding repeating the sins of the past and reaping the if you will, the benefits of the new insight. And that the recruitment process that I have is it's not even really a meritocratic process, because it's not, we don't really have anything to do with where somebody went to school, or we don't disregard it, but it's not about their education or even their experience. I think, as I said to you, I've had people on my team with a number of years experience and with none, because it's really about what they do in the interview process, because the interview process is, to all intents and purposes, a run through of how I expect that person to be able to communicate with the people they're going to need to talk to, communicate and convey complicated subjects, and have the level of listening, empathy, and the validation skills to be able to say to somebody, I've heard what you said, and I'm not just going to repeat it back to you because that might not be helpful, but this is the value from what you said. If we can achieve this for you, will that help you achieve your goals? And helping that person to focus in on outcomes, and that has to come from that process. And that's how we've ended up. I think the final point I was making is that we've got like 5 different nationalities in our team. I'm literally in a minority. I'm an ethnic and sex minority in my team, and long may that continue, because the insight has to be broad. I can't have the final say. Everyone in my team has to have the final say, and that empowerment has to come from being given that empowerment to start with.
Thank you, James. Yeah, I think that, we were talking only the other day, weren't we, about that kind of in the recruitment process, almost that unconscious bias that can come through. And I think, that's the danger, isn't it? That you start to kind of make decisions, based on that kind of unconscious, I need to kind of tick a box, and that shouldn't be what this is about at all. And I think you're right. We do run a very effective and multicultural team. I think we then need to look at things like gender. We need to look at things like experience. We need to look at things like age. But it's trying to get the right person for the right role. And again, we had a chat, I think, recently about making sure that there's a kind of a common kind of value system that goes through the team, so that when they come into the business and they're working with their peers, there's a kind of a shared ethos, and pace, I think, and that cultural piece is so important. So I think lots of valid points there, and I think it sounds like you're doing a good job, but it can always get better. There's always more that we could be doing, and I think that's what I think being at Webgains feels like. It's about that continuous improvement. And Stacy, I know you and I kind of were talking before about that. We run effective teams. We've now set up this panel. What's the purpose of the purpose of the board? Where does the board kind of sit, and what was the reason for putting the board into place? I think we are a diverse business. We are progressive. We are effective in lots of ways, but there's obviously more that we can be doing. And how does that resonate for you?
Yeah, so definitely in terms of diversity and progressiveness, I'd say it's safe to say to describe Webgains as a company that falls into that. So for instance, in terms of just being in the London office, there's a wide array of different people who are from different backgrounds and who are part of different cultures. I think I was speaking to you too. We mentioned that it's really common to actually hear other languages being spoken more than English sometimes in the London office, which is really cool. And then in terms of progressiveness, we have like a number of different policies that encourage flexible working. I know recently, in response to the schools closing down due to COVID, we introduced like a number of policies to better support parents with their work and childcare. So yeah, in terms of like diversity and progressiveness, I'd say we're doing well, but as you said, there's definitely more room for us to improve, and I think that's where the board nicely comes into things, but just not Webgains in terms of improvement as well, like the whole industry. I think there definitely needs to be steps taken into improving areas related to around equality and diversity. For me, one area that I think that we could definitely do better in, not just Webgains, but as an industry as a whole, is race. In the past, when I've attended like different events, so for instance, PI Live, there's like thousands of people at events like that, but it's very, in terms of like the makeup, there was just around a handful of people that look like me, and at smaller events too, sometimes it's just myself who's like the only Black person there. So I definitely feel like there's definitely lack of representation perhaps in this industry when it comes to race, and it's something that we should strive towards improving at all levels. In terms of the board, definitely I think the introduction of the board has definitely opened up discussions around like how we can improve different areas. We've recently partnered up with an external partner who are supporting us in terms of like collecting data and reviewing processes in order for us to be able to suggest the best possible initiatives. But yeah, I think we're taking like the correct steps right now in terms of like improving and transforming, I guess, the Webgains, and striving to reach just better equality and diversity overall. But yeah, we're definitely on the right track of things, and I'm excited to see the outcome in the future.
Great, thank you so much, Stacy. You mentioned a really interesting word there, which was about representation, which I think is really important. That feeling of being represented. And I know, Kalpna, you and I were talking just the other day about the concept of a melting pot. You know, we both grew up in London, and I was saying to Kalpna about how, you know, I always felt that London was a great melting pot. You know, I didn't notice the colour of people's skin. I didn't notice, there's always different languages being spoken. People of different sort of generations, and I'd walk into a boardroom full of men, and I wouldn't think twice about it. It wasn't something that was ever really on my radar, if I'm really honest. I never really thought about diversity, or whether I lived in a diverse world. It was a non-subject, and maybe I'm very privileged in that way. I'm second generation and all that sort of thing, and as you are, Kalpna. But we were talking about the concept of melting pot, and whether or not that's a positive turn of phrase or label, or whether that's about encouraging homogenous behaviour and watering down, and distilling actually the essence and the kind of the real kind of meat of what your cultural heritage is. And Kalpna, you've had the privilege of working with sort of numerous individuals and organisations in your career. What do you think about that? Have you thought any more about that term, the melting pot? But what do you see as the challenges that we face? Are we going to water things down to the essence, or are we going to boil them to the essence and make everyone sort of better, or do you think it's we're watering things down too much?
I think I think it's worth having an honest conversation, actually, because I think this view that, oh, you know, we can all sort of melt into one, I just don't think. I think that is denying people's sort of individuality, their real cultures, their differences, which are positive things, and also denying the experiences people face. So, you know, we cannot sit here and say that there's no such thing as systemic racism or structural racism. We know it exists, and I think if you put everything, you think, oh well, we'll all gather together and it'll be all right. I think you're just sort of, you know, you're not seeing the world for what it is, and not seeing for the things that can actually, all the things that, or decisions that we make that have a bias, whether we like it or not. You know, we do certain things, the things that James has talked about. You know, we take away sort of. We take off where people's schools, you know, which school people came from, or what degree they have, or what area they live in, to try and alleviate that, or to, you know, to bring that sort of possibility, the bias, sort of make that sort of disappear as much as possible. But the reality is that it exists. So I think I think what we have to recognise is that, you know, there is a structural racism that exists, and we have to understand it in order to deal with it, in order to make sure that we have true equality and diversity in our organisations. We have to understand it. And understanding it and talking about it, I think, is a really good thing. It doesn't have to be frightening. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, somebody's pointing the finger at me. I'm trying my best here. It is actually a really brave thing to do. It's what leaders do, actually. You know, we're looking all. You know, we've got COVID at the moment. You know, you could either hide, stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, or you deal with it. And this is something we should deal with. And I think I'm sitting here thinking that, you know, Webgains is part of an industry. It's a forward-thinking, future-facing industry. That's the way it likes to look at it, think of itself. Doesn't like to think of itself like the corporates. I think what this industry and what Webgains as part of it has got is there's an opportunity to have those discussions and to be different and to be really pushing forward in this as well. Because I feel like, the things that you say about Webgains, that maybe Webgains could be the template, the marker of how your industry could look and behave in ED&I. And that's what I like. That's what I've been striving to do with 91 Ways, with BeOnBoard, and the city that I live in. I want it to be different. I don't want it to be, pretending that things don't happen. I want to sort of get it out there. And of course, the other thing is that, the thing that I'm talking about, it's not just about individuals, how we behave towards individuals. It's about how organizations behave. It's the people that we have in decision-making places, the leadership, is the leadership, is it power and privilege that dominates our boardrooms? Who's making the decisions? Who's got the influential, positions? Because those sort of things have huge impacts on a working culture and working people's lives and the community that we live in. So that it's a bigger thing. I think, so for me, I think it's about being really open. If you want to have a conversation about ED&I, you have to have a conversation that's broader, and you can have a really positive conversation. Yesterday, we were talking about, people can feel fearful where they don't want to poke the bear. you said. And I said, I was listening to you and I was thinking, well, what happens if you were like, poking a pinata instead? You know, what it felt like that actually, when you open this conversation up, it's an opportunity. All these great things fall out, and you might pick up a sweet that you think, oh, it's got coffee scented. They're the ones I don't like, by the way. But you think, yeah, you know, but there are lots of array of things that you can actually choose and make good from, you know. So I think there's sort of, I think it's, we've got to have this conversation. I think Webgains, sitting here, I think Webgains could be, you know, the leader in this. It could be the template, and it's because you already have fantastic ways of working. You already have a thought process. I'm really impressed by what James was saying, what Stacy was saying, the fact that you're going to have an advisory board on ED&I. So I think it's, how do we move this forward? You know, how do we be honest about what's going on, and how do we make sure that actually our industry is purposeful, it's employee-centric, it's inclusive, and it has a connection with the community that it serves.
Yeah, thank you, Kalpna. That's, you know, that's really rich. I mean, that, I love that analogy of the pinata. You know, that's kind of what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do, you know, with this event. It's about, you know, shining a light. You know, having these conversations, not being afraid. You know, to open up. You know, the treasure trove, and try the coffee flavor. You never know, you might like it this time round. I don't like them either. But yeah, and I think, you know, what James was saying before about you know, sticking a pin in what you said, you know, the previous question. I think there are a lot of common themes that are coming out from this discussion. I think there's a lot of you know, of goodwill, and you know, we are forward thinking. You know, we are future facing. I think as individuals, as a culture, you know, as a brand, as a business. And I think you're right, absolutely. I think we've got a fantastic opportunity to put, you know, put a stake in the ground, and open up the conversation, and help move, you know, not just the industry forward, but also, as you rightly said, to look at our community. I think that's, you know, that's a really interesting way of looking at things. James, with that in mind, and I think this might actually be our final question. Sadly, we're running out of time, but you know, I think we do have a diverse approach at Webgains, right? You know, and we've said, you know, we've got a fantastic credo of, you know, never stop learning. How do you think we can be that beacon? How can we, you know, measure, benchmark, you know, look forward and look for opportunity to continuously improve, maybe as individuals, as a business, or as a marketplace?
Yeah, well, I think, again, piggybacking straight off of one of the things that Kalpna just said, which I just wrote down, it is about having the recognition that there can be better things you can be doing. I think one of the big risks whenever you talk about addressing diversity or inclusivity in your business is making sure, and this is the pinata bear analogy again, I suppose, it's about seeing it as an opportunity and not as a self-flagellation exercise where everyone has to feel guilty about, I'm not doing enough, I'm too white, we're all too white, oh damn us. That's not the problem. The problem is, are you open to the opportunities that will come through diversity, and are you making the space for that? Because you have to decide to do it. You can't just wait for it to happen. It might happen just generally, but that's just too lackadaisical an approach, which is why one of the things with Webgains, and, you know, testament to what Stacy's doing, is to establish a board which has nothing to do with the exec board that can start looking at those things. And, you know, just as an example, and, you know, recruitment is you know, a bit of an obvious thing to say, but it's kind of where things start, is yes, we might have a diverse group of people. Yes, they might all be from different countries and lots of different languages, and that's lovely. But that's not because we've actively tried to make that happen. I mean, we are an international business, so, having German speakers and French speakers and Spanish speakers is super helpful, but we didn't go looking for Lithuanian speakers or Brazilians. Those aren't our key markets. They've come because they were the best people for the job, and they turned out to be. And so we don't know what we don't know we're doing at the moment. We recruit, and I know how we recruit, and I know that if you do the same thing over and over again, you're probably going to get very similar results over and over again. So do we want to have greater diversity in terms of the ethnic background, the socio-demographic makeup of people applying for the jobs, with people with maybe less schooling who wouldn't come to us? Well, it doesn't mean they can't. There's no reason that they can't. But are we trying? Are we reaching out to those people? I'm sure that we're not, and it's something that I've spoken to Stacy about in the past as well. So having the will to do this and having the will to see it as an opportunity and as an entirely optimistic thing, that's how you go about it. And you try not to do one thing. And this is the final thing I'll say. Kalpna made a very good point. We are in a fast-moving industry, very forward-moving, forward-thinking. There is a risk with that constantly forward-thinking that you don't stop and think what you're doing around you in terms of your business makeup and the people you're bringing along, because you're constantly moving forwards. And so making this decision with this board to make these decisions and be empowered to do so, and open our eyes to these things, that's the good step. And I do hope other people will do the same thing. It's not about copying or being first or best, but if we can set an example, then I'm really happy with that.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Kalpna, do you have a final word that you'd like to sort of say on the topic?
Yes, I just wanted to say, following on from what James was saying, I just wanted to say that ED&I, is tied to business longevity and growth. It is the core of business. It should be the core of business. And what I'm really interested in, what can an organisation with ED&I throughout its organisation, what can it look like? You can't do this passively. You have to be really proactive about it. You can't do it by accident. You have to actually say, I want to make a difference. I want to do things. I want to make sure that we are equal, that we have an organisation that is wholly inclusive, and that does include the community around you. So the other thing I was going to say is that standing by doesn't cut it. You have to be proactive in this.
Yeah. Thank you, Kalpna. That's a great closing statement and a bit of a rallying cry, I think, for all of us to take forwards with us from this conversation. Stacey, I'm really sorry we've run out of time. I was going to turn to you for one last question, but unless you've got one final thing that you'd like to add to the conversation.
To be honest with you, I feel like James and Kalpna have done a really good job at summing everything up. As James said, I don't want to, just repeat everything that's been said, but I'm just really, really, really excited to be part of this initiative, and I'm confident that we will see a lot of impact from this, and we will be trendsetters in the industry. And I hope that other companies can follow suit.
Great. It's great you're taking the responsibility of it. It's great. I think it's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to looking forward to seeing where we go with this. So yeah, just the beginning of a conversation. Obviously, we've smashed open the piñata, and sweets are now laid bare. So hopefully everyone can pick up their favourite flavour and chew on that for a bit. Some food for thought. But yeah, as I say, to be continued. Thank you ever so much for your time today. To Kalpna, Woolf, to James, Tawton, and to Stacy Nkoy. Thank you.
Natasha, thanks. Nice to see you, Stacy, and bye, James. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.